he sued. And I think, looking back on it, we were very ill-advised to go to court, to take him to court. It would prove to be a very expensive and very disastrous case from the Eye's point of view.
But a lucrative one from Maxwell's point of view. The jury gave him £50,000 in punitive damages because the Eye couldn't produce its witness. Several people who were sued by Maxwell, who thought they had very strong cases, later found, as the court hearing approached, that their witnesses tended to disappear on them. Did you have that sort of experience?
Yes, this was the most terrifying aspect of dealing with Robert Maxwell, the sudden realization that he did not play the game like everybody else. He was, in a very real sense, not, when it came to the law, an English gentleman. What would happen is that one would have witnesses, people who telephoned one in the first place, to ask one to try to correct one of the wrongs which Robert Maxwell had done to them. One would run the story, he would sue, one would be back to one source and say, now the man sued, I assume we can have your cooperation when it comes to the court case. And they would not be there. The phone would go dead.
I remember when we were dealing with Maxwell, one particular man, who was a notary public, told one of our reporters that Maxwell had signed 2 affidavits on the same day, one of which said that a particular company had no assets, and one of which said it had a great many assets. Obviously, he had different reasons for making these 2 statements. So we said, fine, that's a very, very good illustration of the sort of attitude he has to the truth. When we went back to this chap on our lawyer's advice and said, we actually need not just the affidavits themselves, but we need the notary public to give evidence that he actually had the affidavit sworn in his presence. At that point, the chap said, well, very unfortunate, I've gone to work for one of Mr. Maxwell's solicitors at this point.
More recently, Maxwell's reaction to my piece about him on The Late Show was slightly more restrained, but only in the sense that he didn't actually sue.
This was a travesty of the truth of what they did, and I could have collected from the BBC at least £1 million in damages. I decided not to do it simply because I don't need the £1 million, and I'm certainly not going to pick the pockets of the licence payers.
This heroic reluctance to sue the BBC didn't last long. When Panorama investigated him last year, he retaliated furiously, through his lawyers and in his newspapers.
Panorama has examined the accounts of several private Maxwell companies. By the middle of last year, many of them also had big borrowings. At the end of June 1990, these companies had borrowed more than £650 million, and some of them were using shares in Maxwell Communication as security for their borrowings. After a couple of months, it was evident that he wasn't going to help at all. And in fact, he'd put out an edict to everyone in the Mirror that they'd be sacked simply for talking to us. So then it went quiet for a few months until the last 2-3 weeks before transmission, when obviously, because the programme was ready to go, it was only fair that we put to him the main charges in the programme. So we opened up communication again, and I wrote him this rather coded but extremely elaborate letter laying out the main areas in the programme and asking him for an interview. His response was to say, get lost.
He decided to take more direct steps and he phoned me up. And because one of the things he'd supplied me with in those letters was a series of transcripts of conversations secretly recorded by him between my researchers and various senior Mirror Group and Maxwell Communication Corporation executives, and it was clear that he was doing secret recordings, we decided that just in case it ever came to the crunch, we'd better record the conversations as well.
This is a program about me and my life and contribution to this country for 40 years. And if you tell me that you're going to stick with the program, all I can tell you is that you will have a writ on your table tomorrow morning. And there's no consideration possible for me to be involved, because you cannot say that you will be fair in this program and then tell me that you can libel me by the mere title of the program.
The last thing he said to me on the telephone was, I give good value. And I think in some ways my regret, I wish we could have persuaded him to take part in our program, because I think in one level, not in the strictly financial perhaps, but in other ways, I think he did give good value. And to the extent to which he provided the rest of us with this astonishing figure, I think he made a contribution. But as far as litigation and journalistic standards, I think he was really a disaster.
If you want me to participate, make sure that I accept that it is fair, and I give good value for money.
And as a litigant, he kept giving it right up to the end. Only a month before his death, Private Eye printed an article claiming that he was tampering with the Mirror Group pension fund. Inevitably, he sued. It was probably the last writ he ever issued.
Francis Wheen reporting.